My parents backed my sister when she screamed I ruined their lives. I left. This morning, 14 calls, begging. The clinking of silverware against fine china, usually a soothing rhythm in Astrid's elegant dining room, instead grated on her nerves. The air, thick with the scent of roasted lamb and privilege, felt heavy with an unspoken tension, a familiar precursor to yet another demand. For Astrid, a woman of 72 whose quiet generosity had fueled her family's opulent lifestyle for decades, these dinners had become less about shared meals and more about anticipated transactions. Her granddaughter, Willow, a young woman of 20 whose every whim had been indulged since birth, had just dropped a bombshell demand. She wanted a gap-year experience in Santorini, a lavish month-long stay in a cliffside villa, complete with private chef and yacht excursions, a sum that rivaled the down payment on a small house. A weary sigh almost escaped Astrid's lips, but she held it back, offering instead a gentle, yet firm, refusal. "Grandma, it's not just a vacation." Willow had protested, her voice rising in a childish whine that belied her age. Her perfectly manicured hands gesticulated wildly, as if to emphasize the gravity of her request. "It's cultural immersion. It's for my personal growth before I start university." For Astrid, the words felt hollow, a flimsy veil over pure self-indulgence. She had heard variations of this argument countless times before. Astrid merely offered a small, weary smile. The lines around her eyes, etched there by years of unspoken burdens, deepened slightly. "Darling, your university fund is substantial, and you have enough for a lovely, sensible trip. But this is excessive. There are limits, even for me." The phrase, "even for me," was a quiet admission of her own long-held enabling, a subtle hint of the dam that was beginning to strain. That was when the storm broke. Willow's perfectly manicured hands slammed onto the polished mahogany table, making the crystal tremble, a discordant chime in the tense atmosphere. Her face, usually composed in an expression of bored superiority, contorted into an ugly snarl, a mask of unbridled petulance. "Limits? You're rich, Grandma. You don't have limits. You're just trying to ruin my life. You've always tried to control everything. You ruined my life." Her voice escalated into a full-blown shriek, echoing through the high-ceilinged room, each word a venomous dart aimed squarely at Astrid. Astrid's son, Julian, a man in his early 50s whose receding hairline and expanding waistline did little to diminish his air of casual entitlement, merely chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. His wife, Cassandra, an immaculately dressed woman whose entire persona was curated for public display, offered a dismissive wave of her hand, her rings glittering under the chandelier. "Oh, Astrid, don't be so dramatic," Cassandra drawled, her voice dripping with condescension, as if speaking to a difficult child. "It's just a little trip. Willow deserves it after all her hard work. Don't be so tight-fisted." Julian nodded in agreement, a smug smirk playing on his lips, a silent endorsement of his wife's cruelty. Neither of them admonished their daughter. Neither of them even looked at Astrid with an ounce of understanding, let alone respect. They merely looked at her as if she were a faulty ATM, withholding funds, a mere mechanism for their desires, rather than a living, feeling human being. In that moment, a profound silence descended upon Astrid. It wasn't the stunned silence of shock, though a part of her registered the raw pain of their words. It was the deep, resonant quiet of a dam finally bursting, a long-held internal barrier giving way. Years of silent resentment, of ignored pleas for kindness, of being treated as nothing more than a bottomless purse, crystallized into an icy, unshakable resolve. Her gaze, usually warm and gentle, hardened into something unyielding, like ancient stone. She looked from Willow's contorted face to Julian's smug indifference, and finally to Cassandra's supercilious smirk. There was no anger in her eyes, no flicker of the hurt that had accumulated over years, only a profound emptiness where hope used to reside. The love she had so freely given, so unconditionally offered, felt utterly drained, leaving behind a stark, cold clarity. "Excuse me," Astrid said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through Willow's fading histrionics like a sharp blade. The quiet dignity in her tone commanded an immediate, though temporary, halt to the family's agitation. She slowly, deliberately, pushed her chair back, the soft scrape against the polished floor a small sound of deliberate defiance. There was no tremor in her hands, no waver in her posture. She simply rose, a statuesque figure of quiet dignity, and walked out of the dining room, leaving the half-eaten meal, the trembling crystal, and the stunned silence of her family behind. She did not look back. She did not say goodbye. She simply left. And as the door clicked shut behind her, a new chapter, one born of quiet devastation and firm resolve, began to unfold. For Astrid, the sound was not an ending, but a beginning. The roots of this bitter harvest had been sown decades ago, in the fertile soil of Astrid's boundless love and the immense fortune inherited from her late husband, Robert. Robert, a brilliant, self-made man, had founded a revolutionary tech company in the nascent days of the Internet. Their early years had been marked by long hours and shared sacrifices, by the exhilarating thrill of innovation, and the quiet satisfaction of building something from nothing. Astrid, far from being a mere trophy wife, had been his silent partner, the steady anchor in the chaotic storm of a startup. She handled the intricate and often bewildering finances, managed their rapidly growing household with grace, and, most importantly, provided the unwavering emotional support that allowed Robert to dedicate himself entirely to his vision. Their life had been one of hard work, shared dreams, quiet contentment, and a mutual respect that permeated every aspect of their existence. When Robert passed away suddenly 15 years prior, a heart attack robbing her of her rock, he left Astrid not just immense wealth, but a legacy built on integrity, foresight, and a deep sense of responsibility. Astrid, a woman of simple tastes who found joy in gardening, reading, and quiet contemplation, found herself a wealthy widow, navigating a world of immense luxury that she had never truly coveted. Her first thought, her only thought, was her son, Julian. Julian had never inherited his father's relentless drive or ingenious spirit. He was charming, yes, with an easy smile and a knack for making superficial connections, but he utterly lacked ambition. Robert had always worried about Julian's lack of direction, his tendency to drift aimlessly from one fleeting interest to another, but Astrid, ever the optimist, believed that with the right support, Julian would find his path, his own unique calling. So, when Julian, in his mid-30s, expressed a desire to explore his entrepreneurial spirit, a euphemism for dabbling in various ill-fated ventures, Astrid had been there, checkbook open, her heart full of hopeful expectation. She funded his failed online boutique, a venture into bespoke organic pet accessories that quickly fizzled. She bankrolled his short-lived luxury car rental service, which crumpled under the weight of unforeseen maintenance costs and careless clients. She even supported a disastrous attempt at a gourmet dog food business, which ended with a mountain of unsold, premium kibble. Each failure was met not with reproach from Astrid, but with another infusion of capital, always accompanied by her gentle encouragement. She told herself she was investing in his happiness, in his future, believing that one day, he would find his footing and make her proud. This constant financial cushion, however, inadvertently stunted Julian's growth, robbing him of the opportunity to learn from his mistakes and to truly value the effort of earning. Then came Cassandra. Julian had met Cassandra at a high-society charity gala, an event Astrid had generously sponsored. Cassandra, with her striking looks, her perfectly coiffed hair, and her even more striking ambition, quickly cemented her place in Julian's life, and by extension, Astrid's. Astrid had initially been pleased, hoping Cassandra's apparent drive would rub off on Julian, perhaps providing the spark he needed. Instead, Cassandra saw Astrid not as a mother-in-law to be respected, but as a limitless financial resource, a golden goose to be endlessly plundered. She reveled in the opulent lifestyle that Astrid's money afforded them, pushing Julian to demand more, to expect more, gradually eroding any lingering sense of modesty he might have possessed. Their suburban home, a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive part of town, stood as a monument to Astrid's boundless generosity. She had provided the initial 20% down payment, a sum exceeding $1 million, without a moment's hesitation, believing it would provide a stable foundation for her son's growing family, a place of security and comfort. But it didn't stop there. When Cassandra complained the kitchen was dated and unsuitable for entertaining, Astrid funded a $500,000 renovation, transforming it into a chef's dream, complete with professional-grade appliances and custom cabinetry. The pool required resurfacing, a sudden and costly necessity. Astrid wrote the check. The roof needed replacing after a particularly harsh winter. Astrid handled it. Even the annual property taxes and home insurance premiums, astronomical in that neighborhood, landed squarely on Astrid's desk, year after year. They never questioned it, they simply expected it, viewing these as part of the silent, unspoken contract of Astrid's wealth. Their garage housed a fleet of luxury vehicles, all paid for by Astrid. Julian drove a gleaming Porsche Cayenne, traded in every 3 years for the latest model, with Astrid covering the depreciation and the new lease entirely. Cassandra insisted on a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, meticulously maintained and upgraded at Astrid's expense, citing safety and social standing as reasons. Fuel, insurance, regular servicing, all were automatically debited from Astrid's accounts. They never had to worry about a car payment, that was Grandma's job. The convenience they enjoyed was profound, yet for Astrid, it was a silent drain, a constant reminder of her singular role as provider. And then there was Willow. From the moment she was born, Willow was showered with every conceivable luxury. Astrid adored her granddaughter and initially found genuine joy in providing for her, believing she was giving Willow the opportunities she herself hadn't had. Willow attended the most exclusive private schools, each year's tuition rivaling a state university's entire 4-year cost. Her extracurricular activities were equally exorbitant: elite equestrian lessons with a privately owned horse, housed in a meticulously maintained stable, international ballet intensives in Paris and St. Petersburg, requiring first-class travel and lavish accommodation, specialized art tutors flown in from New York to hone her innate talent. Astrid footed the bill for all of it, believing she was nurturing Willow's talents and providing her with the best possible start in life, a springboard to a brilliant future. The substantial university fund Astrid had meticulously built for Willow was supposed to be a secure future, a foundation for her independence. Instead, it became another expected source of limitless cash, another entitlement. Beyond the major expenses, there was a continuous, almost invisible, outflow of Astrid's wealth, a constant drip that slowly hollowed out her emotional reserves. Julian and Cassandra each received a generous monthly allowance, deposited directly into their accounts, ostensibly for household expenses, but primarily used for their personal indulgences. They carried supplementary credit cards, linked directly to Astrid's accounts, with no spending limits, symbols of unchecked privilege. Designer clothes, high-end electronics, expensive dining at Michelin-starred restaurants, impromptu luxury getaways to exotic locales, all were charged without a second thought. Family vacations became extravagant affairs, safaris in Africa with private guides, private villas in Tuscany with dedicated staff, first-class flights to the Maldives. Astrid was always expected to pay, to organize, to ensure their comfort, while she herself preferred quiet contemplation by the sea, a simple meal, and genuine conversation. Her own desires were always secondary, always deferred. The insidious nature of their entitlement grew with each passing year, like a parasitic vine slowly strangling its host. Astrid became less a beloved family member and more a convenient financial tool. Her opinions were increasingly dismissed, her quiet suggestions ignored. When she tried to share stories of her own youth, of Robert's humble beginnings and the hard work that built their fortune, they would nod distractedly, or worse, openly interrupt her to discuss their next designer purchase or social event, their eyes glazed over with indifference. Julian would often make comments about her old-fashioned ways, a condescending dismissal of her values, while Cassandra would subtly, or not so subtly, exclude her from family planning, from decisions about the children, even from intimate family gatherings, unless her presence was required to sign a check, a stark reminder of her transactional value. Willow, growing up in this environment of unchecked indulgence, quickly adopted her parents' attitudes, amplified by her youth. She became petulant, demanding, and utterly devoid of genuine gratitude. Her "please" and "thank you" became perfunctory, spoken with an air of obligation rather than sincerity. Astrid's attempts to teach her about charity, about the value of hard work, about the importance of giving back, were met with blank stares or eye rolls, as if these concepts were utterly foreign and irrelevant. Once, Astrid, with genuine affection, gifted Willow a beautifully crafted, sentimental antique locket that had belonged to her own mother, a cherished family heirloom. Willow unwrapped it with disdain, commenting loudly that it wasn't designer enough and likely worthless, before tossing it carelessly onto a side table. Astrid had felt a sharp pang of pain, a deep ache in her chest, but had, as always, swallowed it, convincing herself that one day, they would understand, they would appreciate. She feared that if she ever said no, truly said no, she would lose them entirely. The thought of being utterly alone, without her son and grandchildren, without the semblance of a family, was a fear she had nurtured for too long, a deep-seated anxiety that had plagued her since Robert's death. That fear had held her captive, allowing the exploitation to fester, the disrespect to become the norm, slowly suffocating her spirit. Until now. The quiet click of the front door closing behind Astrid that evening was not merely the sound of a woman leaving a room, it was the sound of a tectonic shift in her world, a seismic event that rearranged the landscape of her future. She drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel of her sensible, well-maintained sedan, a car she had purchased herself years ago, a silent rebellion against the luxury vehicles she bought for others. Her mind, surprisingly, was not swirling with chaotic emotions but was clear, crystalline in its newfound resolve. The initial sting of Willow's cruel words, Julian and Cassandra's chilling indifference, had given way to a profound sense of liberation, an unexpected lightness that she hadn't realized she was missing. The fear of being alone, which had shackled her for so long, had vanished, replaced by a fierce, unfamiliar resolve. She had been alone for years, in all the ways that truly mattered, isolated by the very wealth that tied her to them. The silence in her elegant home was no longer lonely, it was peaceful, a welcome respite. Astrid spent a sleepless night, but it was not a night of tears or despair. It was a night of meticulous planning, a silent, methodical dismantling of the financial architecture she had painstakingly built around her family. She sat in her study, surrounded by ledgers and financial statements, the faint scent of old paper and leather filling the air. She reviewed every single outgoing payment, every standing order, every single account linked to her son's family. The sheer volume of it was staggering, a testament to the depth of their entitlement and her own enabling. Each identified item, each recurring debit, each automatic transfer, represented a thread in the web that bound her to them, a thread she was now determined to sever. With each item she identified, a fresh wave of quiet determination washed over her, solidifying her decision. The years of quiet hurt, of feeling used, transformed into an unshakable conviction. The first rays of dawn pierced through her windows, illuminating a woman transformed. Her face, usually soft with a hint of worry, was now etched with a calm, steely resolve. At precisely 9 a.m., the moment her bank opened, Astrid picked up the phone. Her voice, usually soft and gentle, was now firm, devoid of any emotional waver, a voice of quiet authority. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Astrid Vance here. I need to make some immediate and significant changes to my accounts." Mr. Harrison, her long-standing private banker, sounded surprised but professional, his voice carefully modulated. "Of course, Mrs. Vance. How may I assist you?" "I wish to close all joint accounts I hold with Julian Vance and Cassandra Vance. All standing orders, direct debits, and recurring payments originating from my accounts to theirs, or to any vendors on their behalf, this includes the mortgage on their property, their car lease payments, credit card bills, and any personal allowances, are to be immediately terminated. All funds from these joint accounts are to be transferred to my private, unlinked accounts. Effective immediately. The list flowed from her, precise and unwavering, each item a deliberate cut. Mr. Harrison paused, a moment of stunned silence on the other end, clearly taken aback by the unprecedented scope of the request. Mrs. Vance, that is, a rather comprehensive change. Are you quite sure? This would include the substantial mortgage payment for their residence, the children's university fund disbursements, their vehicle leases. His voice trailed off, perhaps hoping for a reconsideration, a sign that she was merely upset. I am absolutely certain, Mr. Harrison, Astrid replied, her voice leaving no room for doubt, no crack for negotiation. And I understand the implications perfectly. Please proceed with all due haste. She systematically went through a list she had prepared, detailing every single financial tie she had carefully documented during the night, the mortgage payments, the car loans, the credit card direct debits, the monthly allowances, Willow's private school tuition that was still technically running for the remainder of the year despite her planned gap year, even the gardener and pool service for their house. Every single thread was to be cut, leaving no connection, no lifeline. Her next call was to her attorney, Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, I need to revise my will. All previous provisions for Julian Vance, Cassandra Vance, and Willow Vance are to be revoked in their entirety. I wish to establish a new charitable trust, and to make provisions for my distant cousins and a few long-standing charities that are dear to my heart. I will be sending you a detailed outline of the new beneficiaries and my wishes this afternoon. Mr. Davies, a man accustomed to the eccentricities of the wealthy, merely said, "Understood, Mrs. Vance. We shall draft the new documents immediately for your review." An unusual request, but certainly within your rights. There was a hint of curiosity in his voice, but no judgment. As Astrid hung up the phone, a strange sense of lightness filled her, a feeling akin to shedding a heavy, suffocating cloak. It was as if a crushing weight, one she hadn't fully recognized until it was lifted, had been removed from her shoulders, leaving her free to breathe deeply for the first time in years. Meanwhile, the first tremors of panic were beginning to ripple through Julian and Cassandra's meticulously constructed world, a world built on Astrid's quiet foundation. Cassandra, at a high-end boutique, was about to purchase a new designer handbag, a limited edition piece she had coveted for weeks, its price tag astronomical but irrelevant to her. As the sales associate swiped her credit card, the machine beeped a bright, humiliating red, declined. Cassandra, mortified, her carefully composed facade beginning to crack, tried another card, then another, all linked to Astrid's accounts. All declined. Her initial annoyance morphed into confusion, then a cold knot of dread began to tighten in her stomach. This had never happened. Never. Julian, at his exclusive golf club, mid-swing on the 18th hole, received an automated email notification: his luxury SUV lease payment had bounced. A subsequent call from the dealership's finance department informed him his account was now overdue and would incur significant late fees. He scoffed, dismissing it as a trivial bank error, an oversight on Astrid's part. He called Astrid's personal assistant, then Astrid's home line, then her mobile. No answer. His calls went straight to voicemail, a chilling silence that began to prickle his casual confidence. Later that afternoon, a flurry of notifications arrived. Their electricity bill, usually paid automatically by Astrid, was overdue. Their internet service provider sent a warning about non-payment. The mortgage company called, then emailed, about an unexpectedly missed payment, their tone stern and insistent. Panic, cold and undeniable, began to set in for both Julian and Cassandra, a realization that the seamless machinery of their lives had ground to a halt. Julian called Astrid's mobile again, his tone shifting from casual annoyance to genuine alarm, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. "Mom, what's going on? My cards aren't working, and the bank is calling about the house. Is something wrong?" Still no answer, only the relentless, impersonal voicemail. Cassandra, having returned home in a huff, her designer bag dreams shattered, was furiously trying Astrid's number, her hands trembling. Willow, oblivious until her online gaming subscription failed to renew, her virtual world collapsing around her, joined the chorus of panicked calls, a childish wail adding to the growing despair. The phone at Astrid's house rang and rang, a desperate symphony of rising fear and disbelief. By the end of the day, 14 missed calls blazed across Astrid's phone screen, each one a testament to their growing desperation, each one ignored. Astrid, after all, had finally disconnected. The quiet serenity of Astrid's evening was abruptly shattered by the jarring sound of her doorbell chiming insistently, followed by furious, almost frantic pounding. She glanced at the antique grandfather clock in her hallway. It was almost 8 o'clock. She knew exactly who it was. With a deep breath, a silent fortifying of her resolve, she walked to the door and opened it, her expression unreadable, a serene mask of calm. Julian, Cassandra, and Willow stood on her doorstep, their faces contorted with a mixture of rage, fear, and disbelief. Their polished facade had cracked, Julian's usually neat hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt rumpled, Cassandra's designer clothes looked askew, and her usually impeccable makeup was smudged, her eyes wide with genuine, albeit self-centered, panic. Willow, her face streaked with angry tears, looked like a child denied a toy. "What have you done, mother?" Julian bellowed, his voice raw with disbelief, echoing the accusations of betrayal. "My credit cards are all declined. The bank called about the mortgage. Are you trying to ruin us?" His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Cassandra pushed past him, her voice shrill, a piercing sound of barely contained hysteria. "Astrid, this isn't funny. What kind of cruel joke is this? Willow can't even renew her gaming subscription. Do you know how humiliating this is? My car payment bounced. How could you do this to your own family?" Her eyes, usually so calculating, now brimmed with a desperate, wounded confusion. Willow, tears welling in her eyes, her lower lip trembling, chimed in, "Grandma, my Santorini trip. You can't cancel my university fund. My future depends on that money." The entitlement in her voice was still palpable, even in her distress. Astrid merely looked at them, her gaze steady and unwavering. There was no anger, no hysteria in her eyes, only a profound, almost weary calm, a deep understanding of the long road that had led to this moment. "Please, come in," she said, her voice quiet but firm, carrying an unexpected authority that momentarily silenced their outbursts. "We need to talk. And perhaps, for the first time in a very long time, you need to listen." They followed her into the living room, a space filled with tasteful art and comfortable furniture, emanating an atmosphere of quiet elegance, a stark contrast to the chaos they brought with them. Astrid sat in her favorite armchair, its plush velvet a soft embrace, her hands clasped calmly in her lap, a picture of serene composure. They remained standing, agitated, hovering like angry wasps around a broken nest. "Sit," Astrid instructed, her voice holding an unexpected authority, a quiet command that had rarely been heard from her. Julian and Cassandra, momentarily startled by her uncharacteristic directness, slowly sank onto the sofa, their movements stiff, uncertain. Willow remained standing, defiantly, her arms crossed, unwilling to concede. "You want to know what I've done?" Astrid began, her voice low, almost meditative, yet each word carried the weight of years of silent suffering. "I have simply stopped. I have stopped being your personal bank. I have stopped being your limitless ATM. I have stopped funding a lifestyle you have come to believe you are entitled to, but have never earned." Her gaze was direct, unwavering, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Julian scoffed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "Entitled? Mother, we're your family. This is what family does. You're wealthy. What else are you going to do with your money?" His voice still carried the echo of self-pity, a desperate attempt to deflect. Astrid's eyes fixed on him, a steely glint replacing their usual warmth. "You ask me what else. I could ask you what you have ever done to earn it. Do you remember, Julian, when you asked me for the down payment on this house? You promised it would be a fresh start, that you would work hard, that you would build a future. Instead, I paid for every renovation, every repair, every single property tax bill for 15 years. Do you remember the Porsche, Julian? The Mercedes, Cassandra? I paid for every one, every lease, every service, every drop of fuel. You drove around in luxury, enjoying the envy of your friends, while I kept the books, balanced the investments, and paid your bills. Do you remember the private schools, Willow? The equestrian lessons? The ballet intensives? I believed I was investing in your future, in your potential, in nurturing your talents. Instead, I was investing in your profound sense of entitlement, in a never-ending expectation of more. Cassandra's face flushed, a mottled red spreading across her neck. How dare you? We are your family. This is emotional blackmail. Her voice rose to a near shriek, her usual composure utterly shattered. Emotional blackmail? Astrid's voice rose slightly in response, but remained controlled, a quiet fury simmering beneath the surface. Is that what you call it? What do you call years of being ignored unless you needed money? Years of my opinions being dismissed, my presence tolerated only when a check needed to be signed? What do you call it when I offered you love and respect, and you offered me disdain and an outstretched hand, a greedy grab for more? What do you call it when my own son calls me old-fashioned for suggesting a simpler life, or when my daughter-in-law subtly ensures I'm excluded from family decisions? What do you call it when my granddaughter sneers at a sentimental gift and wishes for something designer? She turned her gaze to Willow, who finally, slowly, sat down, looking genuinely uncomfortable, the reality of the situation beginning to pierce her self-absorption. And you, Willow. You, who I poured my heart and soul, and every conceivable luxury into. You looked me in the eye, at my own dinner table, and screamed that I had ruined your life, because I would not fund your latest exorbitant fantasy, your cultural immersion, that was nothing more than an expensive indulgence. You, who has never known a single day of want, who has had every desire fulfilled, dared to accuse me of ruining your life. Astrid's voice hardened, a cutting edge that had never been there before. In that moment, I realized you were right. You had ruined my life. You had made me believe that my worth, my very identity, was tied to my wallet, to my ability to provide. You consumed my resources, my time, my emotional energy, leaving me hollow, an empty vessel for your greed. Julian tried to interrupt, to soften his tone, a desperate plea for a return to the status quo. Mom, we're sorry. It was just a moment of frustration. We'll be better. We'll appreciate you more. Just turn the money back on. Please. He even tried to feign tears, something Astrid had seen him do as a child to get his way, a manipulative tactic that now felt pathetic. Astrid merely shook her head, a slow, deliberate movement. No, Julian. This is not a moment of frustration. This is the culmination of 15 years of consistent, deliberate disrespect. You saw me not as a mother, but as a vault. Not as a grandmother, but as an ATM. And now, the ATM is empty for you. There is nothing left for you to take. She paused, her voice gaining a quiet, devastating power, ringing with absolute finality. This is not a mistake. This is not a tantrum. This is a choice. My choice. And it is final. She slowly rose from her armchair, a quiet, stately movement that signaled the absolute end of the conversation. Her eyes, clear and resolute, swept over their shocked, panicked faces, registering the dawning horror in their expressions. You are no longer welcome here. You have squandered every opportunity one gave you to build your own lives, to find your own worth. Now, you will have to learn. The hard way. Julian, Cassandra, and Willow stared at her, utterly stunned, their mouths slightly agape. The cold, unyielding finality in her voice, the sheer absence of the usual guilt or fear, shocked them into silence, a silence far more potent than any shriek. Astrid, a woman they had long dismissed as a soft touch, a generous fool, was now standing before them, a pillar of unshakable resolve. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to argue. With dawning horror, they realized the game was truly over. The drive home from Astrid's house was steeped in a thick, suffocating silence. Julian occasionally glanced at Cassandra, whose meticulously applied makeup was now streaked with tears of genuine panic, not sorrow. Her usual glamorous facade had completely crumbled. Willow, usually glued to her phone, stared blankly out the window, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, the vibrant colors of her digital life replaced by a bleak, gray reality. Once they were through the gates of their lavish, now precarious, estate, the silence erupted into a furious, panicked cacophony, a desperate wail of disbelief and fear. "What are we going to do?" Cassandra shrieked, tearing at her impeccably styled hair, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "The mortgage. The cars. My credit cards are maxed out. We have no money." "It's your fault, Julian," she accused, rounding on her husband, her eyes blazing with raw fury. "You never made her see sense. You let her control everything. You should have demanded more, secured our future. And you, Willow. Screaming at your grandmother like a spoiled brat. This is all because of you." Willow, in turn, lashed out, her own fear translating into rage. "Me? You taught me to expect it. You always said Grandma would pay for everything. You never told me to get a job. And what about you two? You don't even have jobs. What are we going to do for money now?" Their carefully cultivated family unit, held together by the invisible glue of Astrid's money, was fracturing under the strain of financial ruin. The reality of their situation began to sink in with brutal clarity, each passing day bringing a fresh blow. The very next morning, the mortgage company called. With no payment, and no response from Julian or Cassandra's frantic, often incoherent, attempts to explain, they initiated foreclosure proceedings. The notice arrived a few days later, a stark white envelope containing their worst nightmare. Their sprawling mansion, the symbol of their status and the bedrock of their assumed security, was no longer theirs. It would be auctioned off in a matter of months, its opulent rooms silently mocking their downfall. The luxury cars were next. Repossession notices arrived swiftly, followed by stern men from the finance companies, their faces impassive. Julian's gleaming Porsche was towed away from the golf course parking lot, a public humiliation that sent tremors through his carefully cultivated social circle. The whispers started immediately, growing louder with each passing day. Cassandra's Mercedes was taken from their driveway, leaving her without transport for the first time in years, forcing her to rely on public transport or desperate pleas for rides. Their high society friends, who had flocked around them for years, drawn by the allure of their lavish parties and unlimited spending, suddenly found themselves too busy for lunch, too booked for parties. The invitations dried up. Their carefully constructed social facade began to crack, exposing the hollow core beneath, revealing the true transactional nature of their friendships. Willow's university plans, her Santorini dreams, all evaporated like mist in the harsh light of reality. The prestigious university she had been accepted to, expecting a blank check from Astrid, withdrew its offer when the first tuition payment failed. She was faced with the unthinkable, getting a job, or attending a local community college, or perhaps nothing at all. The shock of having to earn her own way, of being accountable for her own future, was a bitter pill she struggled to swallow. Her sheltered existence had left her utterly unprepared for the demands of the real world. Julian, who had never held a real job beyond his failed entrepreneurial ventures, found himself scrambling. His resume was a laughable collection of vague titles and inflated responsibilities, a testament to his lack of genuine experience. Cassandra, whose only tangible skill was spending money and curating her public image, fared no better. They tried to find work, anything that would maintain a semblance of their former lives, but their lack of experience and their inflated expectations rendered them unemployable in the high-paying roles they felt entitled to. The daily grind of job applications, the endless rejections, the sheer indignity of it all, began to wear them down, chipping away at their arrogance. Meanwhile, Astrid began to breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in years. The feeling of lightness she had experienced after cutting off the financial ties deepened into a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that permeated her days. The first person she called was Eleanor, an old college friend she hadn't seen in years, not since Robert's passing had her time truly been her own. Astrid's demanding family had always monopolized her time, making genuine connections difficult to maintain. Eleanor, surprised and delighted by the unexpected call, readily agreed to a quiet lunch. It was a simple meal, shared at a quaint café, but the conversation was rich, authentic, and filled with laughter, a stark contrast to the strained, transactional interactions she had grown accustomed to. For Astrid, it was a rediscovery of genuine companionship. A few days later, Astrid booked a trip she had always dreamed of but never allowed herself, a 3-week cultural tour of Japan, something her family had always dismissed as boring or too far, certainly not luxurious enough for their tastes. She packed a small suitcase, feeling an unfamiliar thrill of anticipation, a youthful eagerness that surprised her. For the first time in decades, she was doing something purely for herself, with no need to consult anyone, no need to justify the expense, and no expectation of pleasing others. Her home, once a silent monument to her family's demands, now felt like a sanctuary, a place of quiet reflection and joyful anticipation. The absence of frantic phone calls, of demanding messages, was not a void, but a liberating quietude, a space for her own thoughts to blossom. Months turned into a year, then 2. Astrid Vance, at 74, was a woman reborn. The weary lines around her eyes had softened, replaced by a vibrant sparkle that reflected her newfound inner peace. Her posture, once slightly bowed by the weight of unappreciated generosity, was now upright, radiating a quiet confidence, a serene strength. Her elegant home, once a waiting room for her family's demands, became a hub of her own passions and interests. She enrolled in art history classes at the local university, finding joy in ancient civilizations and Renaissance masters, her mind alive with new knowledge. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, her gentle touch bringing comfort to abandoned creatures, receiving unconditional affection in return. She reconnected with a wide circle of friends, traveling with them to art exhibitions, classical concerts, and quiet retreats by the sea, enjoying camaraderie unburdened by obligation. Her wealth, once a burden, was now a tool for her own enrichment and for the betterment of causes she truly believed in, channeled through the charitable trust she had established, a legacy of true purpose. She looked younger, felt happier, and lived with a profound sense of freedom and purpose. Her self-worth was no longer tied to her ability to provide, but to her intrinsic value as a kind, intelligent, and resilient woman. The Vance family, however, had learned a harsh, albeit necessary, lesson. Their sprawling mansion had been foreclosed and sold, its grandeur now a distant, painful memory. Julian and Cassandra, stripped of their status symbols and their unlimited credit, had been forced to move into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town, a stark contrast to their previous luxury. Julian, humbled by the lack of options, eventually found work as a low-level manager at a car rental agency, a far cry from his entrepreneurial dreams. He learned the meaning of a regular paycheck, of punching a clock, of the simple dignity of honest labor. Cassandra, after several unsuccessful attempts to leverage her social connections for a high-paying, easy job, finally took a job in retail, selling clothes at a discount department store. The designer handbags and lavish lunches were a distant memory, replaced by practical shoes and packed sandwiches, the daily grind of retail a stark education in humility. The initial anger and bitter recriminations between them had slowly faded, replaced by a grim determination to simply survive, to make ends meet. They were forced to learn the value of $1, the effort required to earn it, and the humility of starting from scratch. Their relationship, once fueled by shared extravagance, was now forged in the fires of shared hardship, a new, grittier bond. Willow, too, faced a profound reckoning. The dream of an effortless, luxurious life vanished, replaced by the stark reality of her own unpreparedness. After the initial shock and anger subsided, she had to confront the reality of her own lack of skills and experience. She took a job waiting tables at a local diner, a job she initially resented and found humiliating but slowly grew to appreciate for the independence it offered, the hard-won tips in her pocket. She enrolled in a community college, taking evening classes in subjects she had previously dismissed as beneath her, discovering a genuine curiosity for learning. The spoiled, entitled young woman slowly began to shed her layers of privilege, revealing a nascent maturity, a surprising resilience. She was learning to stand on her own 2 feet, forced to understand that the true meaning of "ruined my life" was not the absence of luxury, but the absence of self-reliance, of purpose. There was no grand reconciliation with Astrid. The bridge had been burned too thoroughly, the lessons too painful to forget, the chasm of disrespect too wide to easily cross. But from a distance, Astrid heard whispers of their struggles, of their new, humbler lives. She felt no malice, no triumph, only a quiet understanding, a profound sense of peace. For the first time, they were learning what she had always known, that true worth is not measured in bank accounts or designer labels, but in resilience, self-sufficiency, and genuine human connection. The most profound lesson Astrid had learned was that while love may be freely given, respect must be earned, and sometimes, the greatest act of love is to let go, allowing others, and yourself, the painful but ultimately liberating journey of finding their own way. A true legacy is not just wealth passed down, but the strength and wisdom gained from life's hardest battles, lessons that transcend any material fortune. Thank you for joining us for Astrid's story, a powerful testament to finding strength in adversity and reclaiming one's peace. If you resonated with Astrid's journey, or if you've ever felt taken for granted, you're not alone. Our channel is dedicated to sharing stories of justice, resilience, and the invaluable life lessons learned when people stand up for themselves. If you enjoyed this tale of quiet revenge and ultimate liberation, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss our next story of triumph. And we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced similar ingratitude or disrespect from those you've helped? What did you do? Or, if you were in Astrid's shoes, would you have done the same? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories truly inspire us.